Welcome to the first episode of Canary Wharfian podcast. My name is Alex. I'll shortly do a brief introduction, but before digging in, Canary Wharfian is an up-and-coming website designed for undergraduate students and recent graduates that are trying to break into high finance in the United Kingdom and the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. My background, I was born in New York. I did my bachelor's in a small liberal arts college called Vassar. My first job out of undergraduate studies was with a private equity firm that was based in London. My responsibilities there were to assist the CEO of a portfolio company that was located in Sierra Leone. So I had this unique life experience of traveling and spending quite some time actually in a jungle environment in Sierra Leone, working for a gold exploration company. From there, I decided to go a bit more of a standard professional route. I joined KPMG. I worked in their corporate finance team for a couple of years. After that, I moved to the buy side. I spent 4 years with a single family office working in the real estate private equity and asset management arm. From there, I joined another family office. I worked there for about a year, and then I signed a contract with a Japanese conglomerate to open a subsidiary of one of their portfolio companies in Russia. Unfortunately, those plans were derailed by the tragic ongoing geopolitical disaster. I'm currently an MBA candidate at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. I do to help Richard Demeny, the founder of Canary Wharfian. And with that, Bjorn, I have the privilege of having Bjorn on as a guest today. Bjorn, thank you very much for joining us. Would you care to give us a little bit of a insight into your background as well?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me, and especially double thanks for having me as the first guest on the podcast. Quite an honor and a privilege to open hopefully a long series of podcasts. So my background is in finance and management consulting. So less adventures in the jungle, but I've worked for a finance company or an investor in assets, portfolio assets, mainly loan portfolios, and then switched over to management consulting. So I worked for one of the three large consulting firms out there. More on that later. Yeah, have a bit of a view of both of those worlds, not just finance, not just consulting, but there is a bit of an overlap between finance and management consulting. And especially in strategy consulting, you also work with financial services companies and banks quite a bit. So I could keep what I've learned during my time in finance and apply that during my time in management consulting.
Awesome, Bjorn. Thank you for that. It's a pleasure to meet you. For the purposes of this podcast, I think we're going to focus on your experiences in management consulting. And if you could give us a bit of an intro to the profession, how you view the current state of the industry, talk a little bit about some of the biggest players in the space, how they differ in terms of the quality of services provided from the echelon that's a little bit below, let's say the top three players in the management consulting space. That would be a great place for us to start.
Yeah, sure. So, well, introducing the profession is probably the hardest question because it's not very well defined what a management consultant does and what not. Yeah, so as soon as you're advising management, you can call yourself a consultant, a management consultant. You could even make the stretch that if you work for one of the big four companies, you're also advising them. But this is not what we usually see as management consulting. Mainly what we call management consulting nowadays is quite often strategy consulting. And again, this is a very broad term, but it's usually helping companies figuring out the next step or the next steps because they hit a roadblock, or they can see that they're hitting a roadblock, or that they need to grow. Yeah, sometimes it's the happy path of consulting that they need to grow, or that they need to downsize because their financial results simply say that they're making a loss. Yeah, if you look around the current state of the industry, there has been quite a healthy growth before COVID. COVID was a bit of an interesting time, probably more on that later, as some consultancies had a really good pandemic, so they grew probably even faster than before COVID. Others did not fare as well, but before COVID, you could basically see growth rates of 5 to 10% per year in the larger consulting companies, and so that's quite healthy, yeah. And in a way, you need to grow as a consulting company. Again, more on that later. But they rely on junior talent coming in, and hungry junior talent coming in, and then moving up within the company. And for that, you simply need to grow, because else you don't have enough opportunities for junior talent to raise through the ranks. So currently, you could make the argument, because some of the larger consultancy houses were growing a lot during COVID, they're overhired and now need to figure out what to do. But that's probably more an issue for the short term. So medium term, I think they will continue to grow. Whether it will be 5 or 10%, happy to have the discussion about that, but they will definitely continue to grow at a healthy pace. And coming to the biggest players in the space, if you might have heard the term MBB quite a lot. So those are the 3 most or highest regarded companies in management consulting and strategy consulting. So McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain. And they are usually seen as the most prestigious firms, a bit like Goldman Sachs in the investment world. You can make the argument they might not be the best or the brightest, but they have the best brand recognition. So as the old saying goes, no one got ever fired for hiring McKinsey. So these are the most the 3 largest, not the 3 largest companies, but the 3 most prestigious companies, and they're setting the pace for other companies to follow. They're also sometimes setting the work for others to follow, in as they are writing a strategy, which then other smaller firms will implement, probably for a lower daily rate, but they're then more for their hands-on work. So yeah, Alex, any additional questions or on this?
Yeah, Bjorn, thanks. It's my understanding that you worked for one of the MBB companies, and I'm curious about I'm curious whether you have any experience in the kind of let's say the echelon or the tier below that in companies such as Roland Berger, Oliver Wyman, and what, to your mind, differentiates the top 3 from the tier below?
Yes, that's a good question. So on the client side, I worked with other companies as well. And if you look at MBB, they are global companies, and they cover basically all functions of a company. They cover the whole globe, and they usually cover also all industries, or almost all industries. So if you think about it as a multi-dimensional cube, they cover everything. And if you go to the tier below, like Oliver Wyman, Roland Berger, and quite a few other names there as well, they might not excel on each of these 3 dimensions. So Roland Berger is a good example. They are quite strong in Germany and continental Europe, less so in the Americas and Asia, outside of China, for instance. Oliver Wyman, another great example. They're quite strong in financial services, or that used to be their strength. They're now branching out a bit. So if you are a client and you're thinking about a problem, so you then see, well, basically, if you don't know what to do, you know that you have to do something, but you don't know what to do, you might go with someone who's universal, who's good everywhere. If I'm a company or a bank that says, well, we want to expand in Germany, then maybe, let's say, we don't want to fork out that much money, but let's go with Roland Berger or the local Oliver Wyman office. And if you then go down further down the echelon, you find more specialized consultancies, be it in a function that I say we only do marketing, or we only do financial engineering, or we only do org structure, sales optimization, whatever. Others say, well, we do a bit of everything, but we only take on projects in our home countries, or maybe because of language barriers and so on. So I think this is one of the distinctions. I alluded to another one, has to do with price and pricing power, and sometimes simply size. Yeah, and you say, well, if you want to roll out a global strategy project and you need maybe 50, 100, 150 consultants on a project very soon, you might want to go with a larger company. And well, that being said, there are also quite large companies who are also very focused. If you look at Accenture, for instance, the first thing that comes to mind is usually IT. They have a strategy branch as well, but they are fairly large. They're larger than the MBB consultancies, but you would usually hire them for an IT project rather than for your 5-year global strategy.
Clear, Bjorn. Thank you. It seems to me like you were speaking very much from the perspective of the company considering hiring a consulting firm and trying to make a determination with respect to which consulting firm to go to. But considering the fact that we're speaking for an audience of undergraduate and graduate students, could you maybe share your view in terms of, let's say, from their perspective of like selecting a potential employer? What differences do you see between working for MBB in the lower echelon with respect to things like exit opportunities after their experience in consulting, remuneration packages, some cultural elements? Which options do you think are better? And on the basis of what kind of priorities? So, for instance, if somebody has doesn't care about work-life balance and just wants to make money and have the best, most stellar career, which one should they try to go for, and which one should somebody go for if they have a preference for having some personal time and maybe willing to step back a little bit on salary?
Yeah, that's a good question. And as said before, so I've worked on both sides of the table, but I've also been involved in recruiting. And as mentioned, so the MBB consultancies, they are seen as the most prestigious. If you are at the start of your career and you can make the cut, strong preference to go there, because it's always easier to go to a less prestigious company than do the opposite and start on less and then make your way up. Being the most prestigious also means your exit opportunities are better. And in my mind, it's always a bit tricky if you want to join an organization only because they offer more attractive exit options. So that shouldn't be your main focus, but as a graduate, it plays a role, because we probably speak about the up or out culture later on a bit, but it plays a role. It shouldn't be your only consideration, but one of several considerations. When we come to remuneration, MBB is it's fairly much standardized. Yeah, there will be small differences, but it's not it's not that you will earn twice the salary at Boston Consulting Group versus McKinsey or so. Yeah, might be 5% more or less here and there. My strong advice for graduates there is don't necessarily be fooled by the salary offer right now. Look at potential salary development as well. So just imagine you get 5% now, but then in 2 years, the other firm will pay 20, 30, 40% more or a higher bonus or whatever. Funny enough, the lower, if you want to call them, the companies a bit lower down in the pecking order, sometimes they'll offer slightly higher remuneration, especially if you're joining them as a graduate, undergraduate, or after an MBA, because they want to compensate for the lack of prestige. So you might be able to find a higher salary there. Probably not twice as much or so, but 10, 20% more. And then you should almost write a personalized business case for yourself. Maybe not write it down page over page, but think about what you want to do, what you want to get out of it. How long do you can see yourself working as a consultant? Because as you mentioned, work-life balance, that can be fairly brutal, especially at MBB. It's easier said than done, but working 70, 80 hours on paper looks feasible. But if you look at it, it means you spend half of your week at working, and then in the rest of the week you need to sleep and eat and do all the other things. So that can take a toll. And especially MBB, they got better at it. They managed their teams better. So there is a focus on, we're not putting meetings into our diaries on a Friday, late afternoon, Friday evening. So finish your things, log off, enjoy a Saturday off, and then we meet again on Sunday. But it's not expected anymore that you work 7 days a week, but there is this time management. But it's still, imagine working for 16 hours a day. You need to compensate for this. In personal life, less sleep, less eating, less time for hobbies. So not everyone likes that. Not everyone wants to do this for a prolonged time. And the spoiler alert is it won't necessarily get better if you get promoted, because then you want to keep on being promoted. You want to become a partner. And maybe it's 14 hours instead of 16, but it's still very long working hours. And sometimes also sitting in front of a screen, working on PowerPoint slides, you can question a bit what you're actually doing there, and whether this is for the good of mankind, if you have this aspiration. And last but not least, on culture, there are differences. And if you look at MBB, you'd say, so McKinsey places a lot of emphasis on being the best at everything. They have, I don't know how many Olympic medalists in their ranks. So definitely not one, definitely more than 10. I don't know if it's 100, but it's basically, if you say, oh, here's my Nobel Prize, someone might turn around and say, okay, but you haven't won an Oscar. That it's the culture there. So constantly being the best, challenge yourself to be the best at everything. And sometimes that means that it's so people management, people skills are sacrificed for being successful. Within limits. But it's the saying is that the cool guys are going to Boston Consulting Group. or so the nerds go to McKinsey, the cool guys going to BCG, and there is some truth to it. Obviously, they are fairly similar, but it's more collegial work environment, and the best culture that's being said is at Bain. So there's also the saying, if you want to meet an alumni, someone at McKinsey will give you a 10-minute slot, or on McKinsey alum will give you a 10-minute slot for a call. Someone you worked at BCG will meet you for coffee. Someone at Bain, on alumnus or alumni at Bain, will meet you for an afternoon, give you a tour of their current workplace, have a chat, meet for dinner, and so on. And as these generalizations go, you need to take them with a grain of salt, but there's some truth to it. And having been on the other side of the table, you can also see, maybe I try to find differences too hard, but you can see that there's a bit of a different culture in there. So for graduates, my advice there would be ask around. If you have alumni from your school who are working for these companies, reach out to them, reach out to several of them, so you have a bit of a cross comparison of what they say. Some of them will simply sing from the company's hymn sheet and tell you about the amazing work culture they have. Others will be maybe a bit more truthful. So talk to as many people as possible who worked or have worked for them, especially if they have worked for them. Ask them why they left. And again, not everyone might give you the real reason for it, but the more people you talk to, the more of a picture you form for yourself. Sometimes you have the advice, well, go there for 2 years, 3 years, get it on the CV, and then move on, which can be a valid strategy. On the other hand, that's a really long time, and you will sacrifice quite a bit of your personal life for something when you if you're not fully convinced of it, think twice. It's not like a summer internship. They say 6 weeks. I managed it through gritted teeth. I don't like it here. I don't like the people. Don't like the office. The food in the canteen is terrible. But I soldier on for 4 more weeks. You won't be able to do this for 3 years, and you won't be happy for 3 years. And if you're not really happy, you might also not be successful in those 3 years. So if you are a graduate, think about it. Look at all the potential avenues, angles. I think Canary Wharfian is a brilliant forum for that. Lots of experienced people, sometimes quite opinionated, but the good thing is they give an opinion rather than just copying something from the PR guidelines. But look at it from different angles. And final point on that, as said before, a high salary is nice, but you will spend a lot of time there, and you will spend a lot of time with the people there. So maybe even go to the company that offers you the second best salary, but you have a better impression of them.
Bjorn, before going on, I just want to thank you for being so candid and honest in your feedback. I think it's really important, particularly for people like us who are advising the younger generation, to say things as they are and to make sure that people make decisions on the basis of reality rather than, some sort of falsehood that might potentially lead them down a career and life path that might not be aligned with who they are, and might lead to dissatisfaction, things like that. And picking up some of the more challenging, let's say, aspects of the consulting culture, which sound to me pretty intense based on what you just said. And coupling that with a lot of the rhetoric that's been going around on LinkedIn, among friend groups and the newspapers about mental health. to what extent do you think these consulting firms care about their employees' mental health, and to what extent do you think? Because I know that I was in the Boston Consulting Group offices in Moscow a couple of years ago. I was dating a girl that worked there as a consultant, and there was a lot of writing on the wall about, we're focused on work-life balance, and so I guess two questions. What are they doing, I guess, on a nominal level? And do you think that the reality is commensurate with the words that they speak about their concerns for employee mental health and work-life balance?
Yeah, so the short answer to this is it has improved, and it has improved quite a bit. Long answer is whether this has been enough is a different matter. But from what I've seen is that it's some mental health is not only work-life balance, but it's also having an open culture, how much hierarchy there is in the workplace, and also diversity, and this has improved. So a friend of mine at BCG showed me a presentation where they said, this is was a local partner group 20 years ago, and this is the local partner group now. And you can imagine 20 years ago, they even wear the same sort of ties. Yeah, so all middle-aged white guys, white shirt, dark suit, and they literally had the same ties. So and now this is a lot more diverse, and in a way they have to, because else this simply leads to group thinking, and that might help in certain areas. But if you are invited to work for a client, it's usually because they have an issue, they have a problem they can't solve themselves, and they need to solve it fairly quickly. And sometimes the conversation really starts with, our share price has dropped 20%. Why? What should we do? And then you can do a lot of financial analysis and so on, but usually you need to find something that might not be in the data or connect dots. And if everyone goes the same way, that won't work. So it works well with execution, but not if you're trying to map a plan. So diversity is one thing. As I said before, work-life balance, there is you're encouraged to take time off. Also, as a team, that you decide when everyone on the team takes time off together. There also that you set certain rules. That's maybe not in the last week before the final client presentation to the management board or so, but in most of the time they say we work from, let's say, from 9 to midnight. Outside of these hours, you're not supposed to answer emails. Yeah. In my teams, when I was leading teams, quite often I said, well, during the workday, there's 1 hour that's yours. Switch off the computer, especially when working from home, and do something differently. Because also, since you mentioned LinkedIn, there were the studies, or you might have seen that brain scan. So after 4 hours sitting in the screen, and the same brain after a 20-minute walk, where I say then just getting outside can walk activates different areas in your brain, and then your brain is, or your mind is fresh. You start thinking about stuff differently. Personally, for me, I know if I open a blank slide of PowerPoint, for me I won't get anything done. Yeah, if I take a loop around the block, maybe with a notepad in hand, then I can start mapping things out. And those companies, they're not stupid. They know this, and they encourage that. And it doesn't always work, but more emphasis is placed on this. And some of these companies also put this into their promotion criteria and say, you can be as brilliant as you are, but if you don't interact well with your co-workers, with your teammates, we won't promote you. So going back to the joke about the Nobel Prize, so brilliant. Yeah, you put it on the wall, have it, but you're not interacting well with others. So in the end, we're saying you're part of the problem. You're part of creating that work culture that we don't want. So yeah, so sorry, but no. And so that's one aspect. You will also get training, even down to meditation training or mini meditation. That they say, well, if I'm on a plane for 2 hours, what can I do? So take 5 minutes off, close your eyes, regulate your breath. So there's stuff is done. Let's put it that way. And there are also sometimes mental health check-ins. Well, this is not just for consulting, but you have mental aid, first aiders, at least in a lot of UK offices. So there's also help out there. They have their structures there where you, in confidence, can speak to someone fairly high in your organization and say, so either whistleblowing, saying this is not going well, but also complaining without filing a complaint, and also have an ear to listen and say, is this normal how that person reacts to me? So yeah, long story short, a lot is has been done, and I've worked on other projects with people who've been at McKinsey 20 years ago, and you could really see that must have been a tough workplace 20 years ago, when it was really there's no discussion. You do what I tell you. Luckily, I was to do this. You haven't done it. Why? Do this exactly like you do, and you don't go home until you've done it. And no room for discussion. And you think, yeah, that's probably that must have been rough 20 years ago. Or and it's not like this. Luckily, it's not like that anymore. Whether it's enough what they're doing, I don't know. In the end, the clients pay you for certain results fairly quickly. Yeah, you need to come up with these results fairly quickly because the client has a need, and you have to work a lot. But let's put it that way. It can sometimes, but the interesting part of consulting is also because a client asks you to solve something for them that they can't solve themselves. It's intellectually stimulating. It's interesting what you work on. Yeah, so and that gives you motivation. It's not a sweatshop creating PowerPoint slides anymore. Lots of these companies, they have macros for PowerPoint. That's probably something I miss the most, where you create these beautiful slides fairly quickly. So this is another help. They say, we hear you, we hear your feedback. What bothers you most in your daily work, and then we try to do something about it. So yeah, answer to your question. So a lot has been done, but the nature of it, it's not a 9-to-5 job. So there will be stress, and sometimes stress is a good thing because it focuses your mind. Yeah, so because it's a reaction, it's the fight or flight reaction from when we were hunters and gatherers, but you can't sustain it over extended period of time. And what is probably also a big advantage about consulting is, since you're working on projects, you can simply ask for extended leave and then take a pay cut, but say, I only work 9 months a year. So I have a lot more holiday to recuperate. Pay is still okay. And I can go on extended breaks. I simply, if I finish a project, I won't go to the next project and the next day, but I'll take 6 weeks off unpaid. And this is probably one of the perks of the industry. You simply can do that. It's not like investment banking where every day there's a new decision to be made and you can't leave the markets alone for 6 weeks.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like they are indeed, it's encouraging to hear that they're indeed working on this, and it sounds like there's a little bit more work for them to do. For me, it's news that it's you could take 6 weeks unpaid holidays. That sounds really exciting. Um, Moving on to the next question, I guess why, from the perspective of a student or a recent graduate, why become a consultant? I think we should touch on some of the more positive aspects of the career, and what type of personality this kind of role or this job or function would fit best, and the skills that are necessary to succeed.
Yeah, that's quite a few questions in one. But yeah, so I think one of the biggest draws is, as I said, it's what you work on is intellectually stimulating. It's your learning curve is also phenomenal, because you're working on something that maybe there's something no one has solved before. So that is really interesting, and you learn a lot, and you also work quite closely with high caliber people. Doesn't always have to be the CEO, but you work with people quite high up in the in a client's organization, and you can learn from them as well. And it's since you work with them for 6 weeks, 3 months, maybe even longer, it's almost osmosis. Yeah, it's not like this. I shadow you for a day and then I try to learn as much from you, but you simply observe what they're doing, how they're doing it, and so on. It's really that's probably one of the most interesting aspects of being a strategy consultant, a management consultant. And yeah, in the end, it's usually also a very broad spectrum of projects that you see over a couple of years. And you can try yourself a bit, see what interests you most. If you want to have that exit, if you want to make the next step, you have a better idea of how this all works. And we spoke about remuneration a bit earlier, but one of the draws, I mean, let's be honest, is also that you earn a fairly decent salary fairly quickly, and that there is progression in there. Yes, you're working long hours, but you also get compensated for this. And you also a lot of stuff has been taken care of for you. So if you need to travel somewhere, you write a 2-line email and everything else is organized for you. Yeah, planes are booked, hotels, transfers, whatever. And you can focus on your work. And there's another joke from one of my MBB colleagues. The thing that I miss most is the IT service, because you simply ring up someone and say, hey, my computer doesn't work, fix it. And it's not, oh, have you tried switching it on and off again? Yeah, or whatever, but they do it for you. They do it remotely 24/7. So this is probably should not be the main criterion why you should join a company or not, but or an industry. But it helps. Yeah, you get a lot of support around you to concentrate on your work, probably more so than other industries. The type of person that you should be. So you should be curious. Yeah. So there's I want to look left and right. Thinking out of the box is an awful cliche, but in a way that's what's needed. Yeah. So think outside the box, maybe create a new box. But then yeah, so plan A usually doesn't cut it. But look what, yeah, be curious, wanting to learn, be a quick learner, have interests in different fields. Is this another buzzword, connecting the dots? But that's what's needed. Yeah, so that you have a lot of data thrown at you and saying, so make sense of that, and maybe discover that the data isn't right, or maybe discover that you need additional data. So yeah, probably be curious, quick learner, being ready to work long and hard. It sounds a bit odd, but that helps a lot. Yeah, so you won't be happy in consulting over the long term with a 9-to-5 mindset. Whether that always, yeah. No, go ahead.
I heard somewhere that Goldman Sachs's primary competitor from a recruiting standpoint is not actually another bulge bracket bank, that it's McKinsey. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between investment banking and management consultancy. I know we touched a little bit about, I guess, the nature of consultancy in the sense that you can take downtime, unpaid downtime, which is kind of a cool perk that for me, it was news. But what are some of the other differences in terms of the nature of the work, the lifestyle, the compensation, and not just in an isolated sense, right? But the evolution maybe also of the compensation, and the exit opportunities. Like what's the nature of the difference? Like, if I go to McKinsey, I worked there for 5 years. Is the type of role that opens up before me different from if I were to work at Goldman Sachs for 5 years and I want to leave?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, and we come to the exit opportunities at the end, but it's a very valid question there, and I think the comparison is spot on. That McKinsey's biggest competitor is Goldman Sachs, or the other way around, and you could plug in another name there as well if you want to, but it's not just other banks or other consulting companies, or especially for MBB, it's also startups more and more nowadays.
Oh,
Because in
wow,
the
is
end,
that right? I had no idea.
yeah, because they're seen to have a better culture, better work-life balance, and potentially also better compensation if you get paid in shares and your company does well. This is something that your bonus also in investment banking can't really cover. Yeah, so 10x valuation probably at least 2-3 years ago was definitely possible within a couple of years or even less. But yeah, going back to as a graduate, probably it's a bit of a different skill set. But if you start as an analyst, you need to be numerically strong in both industries. Probably investment banking even stronger, but also for in consulting, you build up large models. They might not be as technical, but you look at profit drivers, for instance, and in investment banking, and then maybe later in PE, you look for valuation drivers. But it's a big Excel file. Let's put it that way. Yeah, in investment banking, I think it's even more pronounced that you need to be numerically strong, not just math here, but proper statistics, applied statistics. You work with slightly different tools in both industries. I think some differences is in consulting you work for client team and you get more client exposure, whereas in investment banking you work on your desk, and you might be invited to a client meeting every now and then, but you're not regularly part of that team that is in contact with your clients. Working hours, the huge debate. You could fill pages upon pages and say what's better, what's worse. I think there's the saying that the markets never sleep, and if you are in a market-facing part of the organization, investment banking, that means at least someone in your team needs to have an eye on it and needs to have eye constantly on it. In consulting, as if there's no project, sometimes you're on the beach or on the bench. I say so there is a bit of downtime built in between projects where you do your training, where a new project has been set up, maybe contract negotiations with the future client take a little longer. So there is a bit more downtime, even if you are working full time. And then, as I mentioned, because of the nature, because it's usually quite neatly split into different projects, you could simply pass them on around and say, okay, yeah, see you in 3 months. That might be one another differentiator. Both are partner-led organizations with have kind of pyramid shape. So this is probably fairly similar. And if you are a partner or managing director, however it might be called, on top of the pyramid, you usually have quite a large say in your area. So that might be different to working in industry, where it might not be as hierarchical, and you might be as a leader, you have co-leaders on it, but both investment banking and consulting, if you're working on something in that team with a pyramid underneath you, so this is your pyramid, this is your project, this is your investment portfolio. People left and right won't have that much influence on what you're doing in that project or that portfolio unless you invite their opinion. And then if we look at the exits, I think a private equity comes to mind first. So this is where investment banking will win, because you have these technical skills for modeling, for valuation, that as a management consultant you don't necessarily have as strongly. And the quip is, so you can learn the strategy a bit easily, but as a strategy consultant you can't learn the evaluation part or the technical modeling part that easily. So if private equity is your end goal, as working in, if you've worked in investment bank before, that's probably easier to make the move. Having said that, larger private equity funds nowadays also have an operations team, which they hire then ex-consultants into. But still here, investment banking gets the points. If you are looking a bit broader, this is probably where management consulting is stronger. So because as an investment banker, you are a banker, you work with numbers, you work in finance. So you probably won't become a marketing person fairly soon, anytime soon. Whereas if you're working in management consulting, you say, this marketing stuff, fairly interesting. Some of the consultancies give you a say in what you want to work on next, and then you can shape your career a bit more towards marketing, just for the sake of the example. Or you even become a marketing expert. So if you're looking for broader exit opportunities, or you don't know what you want to do, what the next job after your next job should be, then maybe management consulting or strategy consulting is more interesting for you as a graduate.
I'm curious about your view on the nature. So let's say if I'm an undergraduate student and I don't care about exit opportunities, all I care about is the experience I'm gaining in the moment from an intellectual perspective. And with that in mind, I'm curious about your view on the difference between the mental process that you say exercise or undergo as a banker, right? And if we break banking down into the three kind of investment banking, to the three core kind of functions that it fulfills, one being equity capital markets, which is basically raising equity capital from retail and institutional investors, debt capital markets, which is the same thing except a different instrument, and M&A, which is related to advising, still from the external perspective, on mergers and acquisitions. And you compare like the kind of core mental process that you need to undergo as a banker which to my mind seems to be very rigid, very analytical, very much inside of the Excel file, and very binary with respect to, the right or the wrong answer. And you compare that to, I mean, you could make the argument that within M&A, for instance, you could have a bit more of a strategic mental process going on, right? However, from my perspective, you're still very much a banker and you're still very much a deal maker, right? If your Excel file says that 1 + 1 = 2, then you can, talk about some sort of hypothetical synergies and come to the client, pitch him, the idea that, 1 + 1 = 3 because my Excel file says so, right? And what I'm trying to get at is that it seems to me that there is potentially a much more creative mental process that underpins the work that a consultant does, particularly as compared to what a banker does. Is that an experience, or is that an observation that you would agree with?
Mostly yes. Coming to the no first is in banking you can be creative as well. Yeah? So this is not brush and paint creative, but you might invent new products, yeah, or new solutions for new products. So yeah, we've seen in the past 20 years or so, we've seen some good new products, some less so if we look at the subprime crisis. But I think you're right in saying so. Investment banking, there's a bit more focus on execution and saying, well, if you want to raise capital for a client, yeah, so you either do it or you don't. Yeah, you're either successful or you don't. And part of that is the negotiation with clients, maybe offering slightly lower price interest rate, however, whatever capital you're raising, but it's still you're raising capital. Yeah, so it's not. One of my professors said so. You won't reinvent the wheel of finance. Yeah, this has been around for probably a couple of thousand years. We're turning the wheel faster now, but there's nothing new in that. Nothing particularly new in that. There were, I think, was it the Romans or even before that they used some sort of securitization already then, back then. And partly you can make the same argument for management consulting. They say, well, what's the strategy? Yeah, buy low, sell high, and collect early, pay late, and the rest is detail. But there's some truth in it, right? But on the other hand, things of what details are we looking at for as a if you need to formulate a strategy, or if a client sees that they are more expensive in their production than their peers, and so they say, why is that? And you could. This is probably where it's still more about execution, and says, well, yeah, you're in a high wage country, but it's outsourced, or maybe you need to renegotiate on your supply chain. But then there's a point where you say, oh, maybe do something else. Yeah, reinvent the wheel, literally. Yeah, so add new products. What could these new products be? Can we produce them and something like that? So this is where I would agree and say, well, management consulting can be a bit more creative in that sense, that you need to find new solutions. On the other hand, this can also be fairly stressful if you simply don't find the answer. Yeah, it's like your math exams back in school where they say, well, time is running off, and I simply the equation is not solved. So that can, because we spoke about mental health before, so that this can add extra stress because you're simply not able to solve what you asked to solve.
Beyond my interest, this is a kind of personal question. Beyond my interest in business and my career and things like that, I'm very interested also in various mental practices to cultivate, things like mental health, and yeah, to help me cultivate my own creativity, help me build relationships. Um, actually in business school, I was introduced to this idea called systems thinking, and we were given a case that talked about one of the big, I think it might have been Ford automobile company in the US. There was a big production plant in the US that was plagued by a really like hateful relationship between the managers and the workers of the plant itself. And this issue was rooted in like a very deep-seated and multi-generational, actually, because in those times, I think the case was from maybe the 60s or something like that in the U.S. And in those times, there was less opportunity to move around. So on generations would stay in the same place, and sons would go work at the plant their fathers worked in, etc. Um, and this poor communication and this mistrust between senior management and the workers was leading to basically poor performance, poor output, in as measurable in numbers and quantity of mistakes that were being made throughout the production process, etc. And Ford was kind of hitting their heads against the wall, thinking, well, what the hell is going wrong? It's like the worst plant. They were going to shut it down, and they sent this guy I think he was an internal guy to go resolve this issue. And what this guy did was he came in and he started building a relationship with the workers. And so he started building a relationship of trust with the workers. And he started showing the workers how their mistakes at this point in the production process were impacting the remainder of the production process, right? So a mistake in terms of attaching the rear view mirror would cause blockages at a later point in the production system, right? And once the worker that was responsible for attaching this rear view mirror became aware of the fact that he was ruining things further down the road, which he wasn't previously aware of, he naturally began to think in a way that was, more aligned with the systemic harmony of the actual plant. And when I read about this and I coupled it with my experiences in meditation and some of the seminars that I've been on with respect to effective communication with people, I saw a huge amount of potential, not only in terms of increasing the output of things like automobile plants, but also at a societal level in terms of for instance, geopolitical systems. I think that you can make an argument that the systemic disharmony that's arising in, let's say, certain parts of the globe, not to be too specific, I don't want to make this into a political conversation. It could be argued that this is a breakdown in communications between people that are in very high positions of political power. And I'm wondering to what extent these kinds of thematics are explored and discussed and worked on in a serious fashion in the big consulting houses.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you probably heard the same. There's a culture, it's strategy for breakfast, so that you can optimize finance. Yeah, you can have the best business plan in the world, but in the end, you're dealing with people, and if they don't work together well, gel well, however this might be defined, then there will be a hard time for all of them. And you alluded to quite a few interesting concepts. So one of them is this empowerment that we say, well, I'm not just a cog in the wheel. What I'm doing has relevance for the overall success of the team, of the company, and overall success for myself as well. Communication structures, and so management consult, there is a lot about work on organization going on. Interesting and difficult part is that this is a bit nebulous, if you want to. So it's not as clear cut. Well, you've done probably quite a bit of financial analysis in your professional life, and then you say, oh, this is 100 is good, 110 is not good, 90 would be better. Yeah, so you can quantify it, and there are fairly strict criteria for this. What is good or not? Maybe not. Maybe doesn't matter whether it's 100 or 101, but you know how much is too much. And there's quite a bit of work going on in this area. So how can you quantify a lack of trust? And then even adding on that international concept, international intercultural communication in an international context. So why, if you look, so in Britain, the saying is the Americans are talking that loudly. But if I say, yes, they might do for you, but in an American context, perfectly normal behavior. Yeah. So is there a conflict? Yes or no? Or potential conflict? And so some of this is a bit lighthearted and stereotypical, but some of that can have implications later on. And so A, they're doing work on this quite a lot, but B, they're also working on this internally. So if you create a project team, for instance, so McKinsey is using Myers-Briggs tests, for instance, to make sure that the personalities on that project team don't clash. And then you can make, Myers-Briggs is a bit pseudoscientific, but at least it's a step into the right direction. And there are other there are other tests as well that you do fairly regularly. So this whole discussion about introverts versus extroverts, and again, this is then going back to the Americans in the UK situation. I said they're both behaving perfectly natural, and if on their own everything will be fine, but now you put them in a room and give them a task, and then you have the potential for conflict, or not. Maybe conflict is too strong a word, but you say this can go wrong, or a lot of time is spent in discussions about how to work rather than the actual work, or so on. So companies are aware, so consultancies are aware of that they're working on this. Interesting part of it, there is no clear-cut answer, so the work continues. But my reading is they've learned from the past when things didn't go that well. So they try to avoid that going forward, and become better at it, because in the end, it's a fairly high performance environment. Similarly to let's say a football or a soccer team, they say if you put it statistically the 11 best players on the field, will they win the Premier League, the World Cup, whatever? So maybe not, because the other team, they're simply working together well, or they have that stronger bond. They say we're friends. We're fighting against someone. Well, not fighting. We were playing against someone who might be stronger than us, but we'll show that. So we've done so. And so long story short, so this composition of a team is they put quite a bit of emphasis on it, and working in this project environment also gives you a bit of a potential exit outlet, that you say, well, if you don't fully get along with your colleagues, it's only for a couple of weeks or month or so on. And there's a lot more emphasis also on how to work together in the teams that I was working in. So we sometimes had a check-in once a week for an hour. We simply talked about what worked well, what didn't work well last week, what could we do better. Every team member say, do you have any obligations or something you would like to do next week? So I want to go to the gym, see the school play of my kids. Also, so Wednesday I'm off from 7 to 9. Can we work around that? So which then goes back to mental health, right? So a lot is being done there to make this a better place.
That's great to hear. Can we talk a little bit about a day in the life of a consultant? It's my understanding that consultants often have to travel a lot. How does a typical day of a consultant look?
Yeah, so it's probably better to have a look at a typical week, because you
Okay.
mentioned traveling, and pre-COVID, it was the norm that you spend usually 4 days on a client side, sometimes quarter 5-4-3 model, so 5 days a week, 4 days a week on the client side, 3 nights away, and then companies try not to go beyond that. But yeah, as we had before, working on a weekend is sometimes part and parcel of being a consultant. But yeah, nowadays there's more hybrid delivery, so the clients do not necessarily expect you to be on site for the whole time of the project. But if you're a traveler, usually you take the first train out on a Monday morning. So that means getting up early on Monday morning. If you're flying, taking the 7 or 8 o'clock flight out of Heathrow to wherever you want to be, arrive at the client site, depending on where you go, 10, 11 noon. Monday is then often quite a bit of a slower day because everyone traveled out really early. But you set up the week, you have the first meetings with your clients, and
So, can I interrupt you just for a sec, Bjorn?
yeah,
When you arrive at a client site, how does it work? Does the client give you a workspace? Do you bring your own laptop? Where are you actually working, or are you just going to meetings? How does that actually look specifically?
I've seen lots of different things. So some clients will give you a fully equipped office, some others not, where
Do,
you really need to pull chairs and and tables together. But
do
they
some
want you to.
clients do some clients make you sit on the bench outside?
They would like to, but um, because sometimes, yeah, they can read the writing on the wall and saying, well, you come here to cost cuts, and that means
Yeah,
job
yeah,
losses. So
yeah.
not everyone will welcome you with open arms, but it's so usually you get so what's called a team room, where the team has desks space, and usually you get a key, you can lock that. Sometimes you also get basic infrastructure like a printer, scanner, flip charts, and so on. But some clients have temporary offices for that, not just for consultants, but sometimes they have internal teams coming into work. So this works fairly well. If they are not used to having consultants over, it sometimes is really you might sit in a meeting room, sometimes literally on a couch, then looking for a better room. But yeah, you usually you get some sort of a space for your own as a team. Sometimes also 1 or 2 meeting rooms that you can use for breakout sessions. But yeah, I've seen the whole spectrum. Let's put it that way.
Cool, cool.
Yeah. So you arrive on the client side, then some close to noon on a Monday. You prepare the week ahead. You have first meetings with clients, maybe looking back at what you've done in the past week. At the beginning of a project, it's more about gathering information and data. Then you build up hypotheses, test them with your clients, and build them into a model and write a presentation on the way, and then hopefully present a solution to the project sponsor. So yeah, on a Monday you ramp up work, you organize it. Tuesday, Wednesday usually are the crazy days, because you quite often you have a bigger meeting on a Thursday with a project sponsor or someone senior in the company, because they want to see the progress. Maybe not every week, but fairly regularly, maybe every other week. But you're working towards that. So yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, you then have lots of meetings depending on what stage you are at in the process. It's more about exploration, analysis, then formulating hypotheses, falsifying them or not, and then creating the final delivery. And yeah, so as I said, Tuesday, Wednesday, work towards it. On Thursday, you take the last flight train also out. So it's usually a shorter day. But you have that big meeting, the big one coming up, where the shape or scope of your project might be shifted a bit. So, or you simply want to get a tick in the box for something. So this is then your main aim for Thursday. Then yeah, the benefits of traveling a lot is every now and then you can visit a airport lounge, train station lounge. So you try to have half an hour for that, and then go home. And on Friday, it used to be an office day where you did more internal work, less so client with client exposure, but that was spent for training, review, recruiting, more work on the company rather than for the company. This has shifted a bit now with more remote projects. So this is why quite a few consultancies try to protect Friday a bit and saying, so yeah, this in the old days, out of sight, out of mind. So the client didn't bother you as much. Nowadays, they just Slack you or WhatsApp you. But they're saying, so feel free the afternoon, block that. Yeah, finish what you want to finish. As a leader, finish what you finish, but don't send it out to your team at 11 o'clock on Friday night, because then they spend their whole weekend thinking about it. Yeah, if you finished it, maybe just send it on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, if it's not urgent. So sometimes it's because we spoke about work-life health. Sometimes it's just these little small tools, small changes. Or if you, as a project manager, team leader, if you send something out, mention it. So I don't expect you to work on this till Monday. So that's, yeah, there is a bit more of freedom in there. And yeah, then next Monday you do it all over again. And projects tend to be around 3 months, but with a bit of variation on either side.
Out of curiosity, have you ever had a client that was outright hostile to you and, like, I don't know, blocked your ability to access information or maybe even some physical space in the offices? And how did you deal with it?
Physically, probably not. Again, they might have liked it, but you're not always welcome. And depending on which area you work on, you work on cost-cutting projects, or you're hired by someone at HQ, and then you go to a factory and say, well, you sort that factory out. And some of the local leadership, let's call it that way, and they know that things are not great, and they know that they are responsible for it. So yeah, people react differently to that. So will you always embrace and actively help the people that are quite likely to cost you your job? It's an interesting discussion, but yeah, I mean, it's natural that they'll try to, well, don't give you certain data, give you different data. Sometimes it's also no ill will. Sometimes you'll be surprised how messy information is, and your job as a consultant is to get all the information structured, play it back, and sometimes the client even doesn't know about it. Sometimes it's still paper based. So yeah, you literally go into a room full of folders and then start going through it. It's or even you have a conflict in the company and you're asked to to work for one side. But so there's several solutions for this. you quickly understand so how hostile inverted commas your project is or will be perceived. If it's more about saying, well, let's sort this out together, and there's still hope, then if you demonstrate this as hey, I local factory manager, I want to help you too. Yeah, so this is not me being, I'm not your opponent. Yes, I've been sent by someone, but we want to sort this out together. So let's work together. Let's collaborate. So that's one solution. If it doesn't work, you sometimes have to go back to the project sponsor and say, yeah, I can't do my work. I don't get the data. I don't get that they block the entrance to the factory for me or the garage. I mean, this rarely happens, but and you're supposed to deal with these situations, and you also get training for this. They say, so what if someone doesn't help you? And sometimes it's even less than that. Is people are busy, people they are busy, and you're coming then and you're asking more of them, and they're already working long hours, or what's long hours for them, and you ask extra 1, 2, 3 hours of their time a day, and they want to see the school play of their kid, or they have other commitments, and then sometimes it helps, understand this, talk to them, understand this. Maybe their boss is also the project sponsor, then you go to the project sponsor and try to explain. So yeah, we have a bit of a time conflict here. Can you reprioritize certain things for employee A and B so they can free some time to work on a project for the next 4 weeks or so? And it's you can do a lot, but there are these situations where you need to go back to the project sponsor and complain as the last resort.
So for the sake of time, Bjorn, I want to focus our energies on 2 last questions. Let's talk a little bit about how I would imagine that the MBB and the tier below firms are all structured from hierarchical and organizational perspective similarly. Could you run us through how these organizations are structured, and how a candidate grows from small to large inside of them?
Yeah, sure. So they're using different names for different levels of hierarchy, but in the end, it's fairly similar. So as an undergraduate, you usually join as what's quite often called an analyst, which means you are, as it's in the name, you're analyzing data. You try to find solutions for smaller subsets of questions. You're a working member of the team. And if everything goes well, after 2, 3, 4 years, you then get promoted. What some companies call is associate, others consultant, but this is then you oversee analysts, maybe not line manage them, but you double check their work. You might distribute work amongst them, and you're responsible for a bigger chunk of the work, and you also might have the power to distribute some of that work. Above that, there's a project manager, team leader, engagement manager, which does exactly that. So they are the main contact to the person operationally running the project on the side of the client. They are leading this project. They're not necessarily responsible for the overall project, but they're leading this project internally in the within the consulting firm. They are distributing tasks. They are creating work packages and seeing that these work packages are solved. And then above that, there is sometimes quite usually, or usually there is someone above these team leaders, maybe looking after several projects, called principal, associate partner, director. So they are on their way to become a partner, which is usually then either you're a direct owner or co-owner of a consulting firm, or sometimes this is only senior partners, senior directors, and so on, but you're on a good way to become one of those. And this means you have the P&L responsibility for a project or several projects at a time. You're also responsible for business development, so attracting new clients, and you will also have a burden steering the company towards new areas of business, new topics, new clients, new geographies, and so on. And the person in the level below, that principal, associate partner, director, helps you with that, learns how to become a partner, but also takes the day-to-day steering of some projects of you, and then works for you as a partner, works with the engagement managers or project leaders, team leaders, to ensure that there's a decent, timely delivery of what you've been asked to deliver.
And
sorry, maybe one thing. So as an MBA graduate, or undergrad, postgraduate, you usually then join at this associate level, one below team leader. Smaller consultancies, you might become a team leader or project engagement manager right away. But if you haven't worked in consulting for you, that learning curve might be really, really, really steep, because you need to tell people to work on something that you don't fully understand.
right.
So it might even be beneficial for you to start a step lower. But sorry, you had another question.
With respect to, let's say, if you're trying to forecast in your mind how long it'll take you to get to partner level as, let's say, an undergraduate starting at the very bottom of, an MBB firm, imagine that there's a fork, right? Some people have probably grown very fast, other people have grown a bit slower. But if we look at like an average, middle of the road kind of average, maybe ballpark, let's say estimate, how long do you think, if you plan to spend, the next X amount of years in one firm, will it take you to get from zero to hero or entry to partner?
Probably 10 to 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not giving ideas to anyone. Yeah, so this is it's always an individual case. You might sometimes it's just about luck, not just about luck, but luck plays a role as well. Imagine your area of expertise would have been cruise ships in 2020. Yeah, you basically would have been out of the equation for 2 years, and then it might have been 12 to 14 years or something. Yeah. So I think this is a good rough estimate, but it's nothing that as a graduate you should put in your mind and saying, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen, because you never know. Yeah. It can be faster. Again, if you get lucky, client likes you, says, okay, great, let's spend another 10 million with you. Off you go up to the partner level. 2 years faster. Same thing could your main counterpart leaves a client organization, the replacement likes another consulting firm better, maybe because they've worked there before, and all of a sudden the 10 million revenue that you planned are gone, or are very or dramatically reduced. And this is nothing about you as a person. It just can happen, and some projects will work out better, others less so. And having it seen from the inside, sometimes you don't know at the beginning. Sometimes you say at the beginning, after 2 weeks, this is going to be a hard, long, winding route. The client is demanding, asking lots of questions, questioning our work, questioning why we're here. And after 4 or 6 weeks, you're friends, the best friends forever. Yeah. And sometimes it's the other way around. Really good start, and then the whole thing doesn't go anywhere. So this is obviously some of this is down to you and how you work on it, but sometimes it's just external factors. So long answer short, average, but take this with a big pinch of salt, and don't take this as a target. It just gives, just to give you an idea.
Yeah, sure. And I think as a last question, I want to ask maybe, for your advice to, recent graduates or graduates that are trying to break into consulting. And I would like to ask your advice on the basis of not only how to get in, how to do well in let's say, case interviews, but advice with respect to determining whether this is something that you really want. Because every time that I speak with I was, quite close family friends with a guy whose father was a big boss at McKinsey. He actually set up Russia's McKinsey office. And I went to meet with him a couple of times for advice, and people like him and of his caliber that have spent a lot of time in consulting, the big thing that they really focused my attention on was to make a determination for myself with respect to whether this is something that I actually want, and not be, let's say, guided by the compensation or by the prestige. So I wanted to ask you about, that component. Yeah, how would a recent graduate make that determination for himself, whether that determination is really important, whether they should throw caution to the wind and launch into the, studying process for case interviews, and then also your advice about, how to do well in case interviews, what's the best way to go about preparing for them, and some of the softer components about how to behave during the case interviews so as to make a positive impression on the interviewer.
Yeah, it's obviously tricky as a recent graduate or someone who's about to graduate soon to make that decision about determination and so on, because in the end, you mastered university, saying, well, the world is your oyster. Of course I can do that. So that's probably a tricky call to make. It helps if you've done an internship, summer internship, if you can get one. If you're already about to graduate now, it might be a tad too late. But if you are in your first year or your second year, my advice would be try to test it. Either get an internship, or maybe there's a consulting society or club at your university or business school, and at least there you get a feeling on how that works. Maybe talk to some of your professors or teachers, if they have links or connections, and sometimes you can do a consulting project without working for a consulting firm. Could be academic consulting. Some classes are with real life companies, and that already gives you a bit of an idea on how to work as a consultant. So that would probably be my main piece of advice. Try to get a taste. Maybe even do a couple of these things. If you can't do that for whatever reason, next best advice is probably talk to as many people as possible from different angles at different points in their careers. So don't just talk to the first year analysts. If you can, if you're friends with the guy who built up the Russia office, if you're lucky enough, this is a really value, because this gives you a completely different angle of someone who has worked in the industry for probably 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Can also listen to podcasts, visit forums, be open. When you do so, be open in your questions. That there's not a wrong question. And even if you talk to a recruiter, it's rather you ask the question that you really want to ask and get an honest answer, and then you figure out consulting isn't for you, rather than asking a question that you think would be a good question and put you in a good spotlight with a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, there are thousands of companies, not just in consulting, there are gazillions of potential employers out there, and you can't please everyone in there. So another piece of advice, where just in the process, be true to yourself, and ask the questions that you want to ask, and don't stop asking until you got the information that you want to. They might say to you, listen, there's a queue of 50 people behind you. I can't talk longer for you now, but here's my business card. Please call me. Happy to set up a call, and so on, which I will usually do. Yeah. So ask questions. Don't expect answers all the times right away, and be also a bit humble. Where you say, well, for them, you are just another graduate, in inverted commas. So they might not they might not put a half an hour on a career fair they will not invest half an hour in a career fair into you if there are thousands of other potential recruits to be seen. But you have a foot in the door, you can talk to them. So that's probably the best way to get good idea. There are a couple of behind the scenes books as well, usually a bit more on the critical side. But if you have some time after graduation or over summer, do some reading, hit the library for a day or two. So that should give you a good idea. And the good thing about consulting is, even after 2 or 3 years, if you see that you don't like it and you don't enjoy it, it's not necessarily a choice for life. So there is the potential to make an exit, be steered a bit there. If you don't want to work as much on client projects, there are other roles in consulting firms like the expert track and so on that you can work on. So there are plenty of opportunities, and it's not a decision for life. Let's put it that way. But it's a decision for life. If you want to join it, then do it now, because as an undergraduate, it's the best opportunity to get into a consulting firm, because this is the usual hiring process. And yeah, we're going for the case interview. So case interviews, I think it's a lot about it's about repetition, because it's a certain way of thinking. So get a book or two, go online, try to solve a few cases. Quite often, if there's a consulting society at your uni, try to get in there, practice case interviews with each other, because in the end, this is just it's kind of a mindset. There's quite often there's no right or wrong answer, but you need to just get into the habit of thinking that way. And in the interview itself, yeah, you never know who's on the other side, but always demonstrate your calculations, your thinking. Over communicate if you can, until they tell you to shut up. They will tell you if you say, okay, this is not relevant. I don't know. 1 + 1 = 2. That's a given. You don't need to run me through the equation. But in the beginning, try to explain a bit too much rather than not enough. Ask questions. They will tell you at a certain point where they, we don't have that information, or it's not available, or so on. But ask questions. Also, if you make assumptions, try to place them a bit. So why you make a certain assumptions, or how can you narrow it down? So I mean, it's not a case study, it's a brain teaser, but it's so how much paint do you need to for a jumbo jet? You might not know how long a jumbo jet is, or 747, but you say, well, it's not 10 meters, it's not 1,000 meters, so you can narrow it down and just demonstrate the thinking. So be vocal about what you're doing, and sometimes that's even more important than coming to the right conclusion, because sometimes the case is so open that it could be A or B, but it might not have that one perfect solution, quite often the hint is the less data you get, the more open the answer is, and the more they want to see how you're thinking and how you're communicating. And last but not least, there are less and less of stress interviews, or where they put you under pressure, or try to put you under pressure at the interviews. Yeah, sometimes it's designed so that you're a bit on your calculations and your preparation. You don't have that much time, so you need to prioritize. But there's really then aggressive interviewing, putting you in the spots, is done less and less so. And because if it happens, you might even then decide this is not the right environment for me. And if the company asks you for feedback after an interview, again, yeah, feel free to raise that, yeah, and saying, so I felt a bit cornered, because you can be tough without being aggressive. So in the end, yeah, it's practice makes perfect. It's a bit of a strange atmosphere of thinking, not atmosphere, strange way of thinking about some stuff, but it gives you an idea. It's basically a 12-week project condensed into an hour. So this is what the other side wants to see from you, how you can go through the different stages. And by no means you need to solve everything and you need to be perfect on everything.
Well, with that, Bjorn, I wanted to thank you for coming, for attending, to speaking with me. For our viewers, there's plenty more content and information that hopefully you'll find useful on Canary Wharfian. So be sure to check the website and stay tuned for our next podcast.
Okay, thanks for having me.